Good evening again. I'm Beverly Harper, president of Portfolio Associates. To get us started, I would like to introduce from SEPTA, Dan Nemiroff. He is the manager of planning projects and project manager for the bus revolution. I'll be back after Dan to tell you a little bit more about the meeting this evening and to provide some technology reminders. Dan.
Thank you, Beverly. My name is Dan Nemiroff, and I work in the Office of Strategic Planning and Analysis at SEPTA, and I am the project manager for Bus Revolution, which is the authority's first comprehensive redesign of its entire bus network. Bus Revolution is a crucial part of the authority's strategic plan, where we are looking at ways to take all of our disparate modes and all of our different disparate services and turn them into one lifestyle transit network. The three priority programs are the Regional Rail Master Plan, the Wayfinding Plan, which is SEPTA Metro, as some of you may know it, and this project, the Bus Network Redesign. Together, these projects are going to help move us towards the creation of a more seamless, effective, and reliable transit network, which can be used for all different kinds of trips. As we move forward through this project and through the next few months of analysis, I invite you all to look at planning.septa.org to read about these other exciting projects and think about how they can all work together to improve transit in the region. And with that, I'll hand it back to Beverly.
Thanks, Dan. The team this evening consists of 3 people from Nelson Nygaard, the prime contractor for the SEPTA Comprehensive Bus Network Redesign, its short form known as the Bus Revolution. Henry Felsman from my team, Portfolio Associates. We are one of the engagement subcontractors on the project. Henry will be helping with the questions and answers part of the program. We also have a tech team assisting us this evening from TAT Communications. Just a few technology reminders. Please put questions in the Q&A feature. There is also a live transcription feature that you can turn on. You can read what people are saying with this feature. You can make the font larger. You can also move the text box around. Your video is turned off and your speaker is muted. As I mentioned, we had over 400 people who registered for the session this evening. We're very happy about that. It's not possible to accommodate that many people, that many images and speakers. Also, the meeting is being recorded. On the agenda this evening, it will include we'll start with 3 tech review questions. We just want to make sure that feature, the polling feature, is working. You'll be able to vote and then immediately see the results. There'll be a presentation by Nelson Nygaard, Bethany Whitaker. And then during that presentation, there'll be 3 more polling questions. You'll get a live view of some of the new features that are on the Bus Revolution website. And some of them are really cool in terms of what you can do and manipulate and see about this incredible bus network. After the presentation, we'll then go into the questions and answers. So again, please put your questions in the Q&A feature. So to get started, we'll have 3 questions, 3 easy questions for the poll. So Henry, cue the first question. So I usually have a question about the you-know-who team that's not in the playoffs this year. So we had to struggle to find some questions that we could ask. Why will you be watching the Super Bowl? One choice: Cincinnati Bengals fan, LA Rams, football fan, halftime show, commercials, And for the few people who'll answer this one, what is the Super Bowl? So let's have your answers. And let's see the results. Whoa, okay. Football fan, I'm with you. Commercials and what's the Super Bowl? We're not even going to identify who asked that question. Let's go to the second question. When was the last time you rode a SEPTA bus? Single choice, today, within the last week, within the last month or so, more than a month ago, but since the pandemic started, not since before COVID, March of 2020. Wow. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see the answers. Today, within the last week. Great. I think I've ridden twice within the last week. And our final tech test question. How far a walk is it to your nearest bus stop? Less than 2 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, or more than 10 minutes? Let's see what people are saying. Less than 2 minutes. Excellent. I live less than 2 minutes from my bus also, but I couldn't vote. So one more tech reminder. If you have tech issues, you can put a question in the Q&A function and we will try to help you. However, as you know, technology is like sometimes it does not want to cooperate. So there will be some things that we cannot help with. With that, I'm going to introduce Bethany Whitaker, who is a principal at Nelson Nygaard and project manager for the bus revolution. Bethany. No, are you muted? You're mute. Okay. Can't hear you.
Bethany, this is the web tech. Try disconnecting your headphones and plugging them back in again. Even disconnecting them, we might be able to hear you through your laptop speaker. That's a possibility.
Okay, does that sound better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry about that, everybody. So thank you very much, Beverly. As Bev mentioned, my name is Bethany Whitaker. I work for a consulting firm, Nelson Nygaard. We're the prime contractors for the Bus Revolution, and I'm the overall project manager. So thank you all for calling in. I know it's kind of a dreary night in Philadelphia today, so hopefully everybody's kind of hunkered down and excited to learn a little bit more about the bus revolution. And I also want to start off by thanking everybody who participated in the project in any way over the past year. We did a bunch of outreach in the fall and did some surveys and did some telephone surveys and had a lot of meetings. So I know a lot of you participated in some way, so we really appreciate that. And I will share a little bit of the findings from some of that activity and then just kind of talk to you a little bit about what we've been up to and what we're going to be doing for 2022. So many of you may have seen this graphic before. The Bus Revolution, it is a 3-year project. We are in the beginning of our 2nd year. So we really spent that first year digging into the existing conditions, trying to understand the system at a network level, at a route level, from the overall market, talking to some riders, talking to stakeholders, talking to residents, understanding where those opportunities for improvements are. In 2022, we'll take those ideas for how we can make the bus network better, put them into different packages, or sometimes we call them scenarios, or just sort of ways that we think we can do a better job with the way the bus services are laid out and organized. We're going to be sharing those with the public, get some feedback, and then we'll do some draft recommendations, get some more feedback, create final recommendations, and then our goal is to move into implementation in 2023. So in now taking a step back and just kind of getting everybody caught up to speed with what we did in 2021. It was really focused on understanding where those opportunities are, what rider and stakeholder and community priorities are for service. So as I mentioned, we did these 3 steps, and I'm going to talk just, about 10 minutes and just give you the highest findings from both the market analysis, the state of the system, the route evaluations, and what we learned from the stakeholders. So in terms of the market analysis, what this is we took a look at Southeast Pennsylvania, all of SEPTA's service area, and tried to understand where the strongest markets and opportunities for transit services are. So we looked at things like population and employment. We looked at land uses and the density of population and employment. We looked at demographic characteristics. We looked at existing travel flows, so where people are already traveling. We looked at how well bus service was lined up with these markets. We also looked at COVID, and we did summarize those in a report. That report is on the SEPTABusRevolution.com website, and I'll show you how to find that in a second. But just some of the highest level findings. So one of the things that sort of stood out from us from the very beginning is how good a market for transit service Southeast Pennsylvania is. This map shows population and employment as well as some demographic characteristics. These places where are bright red are places where bus service could operate every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes. When the colors start to pale out, the level of service is reduced a little bit, but it's still quite strong. So the market overall is strong. And then I think it's interesting that, of course, Center City has a really strong transit market, but so does other parts of the region, right? So West Philadelphia is also a really strong market for transit service. And I also just want to take a moment and say, sometimes, the strong market means that we can operate a lot of transit service. It also means that there's a lot of jobs there. There are a lot of people there. And in some cases, it means that there's a lot of people with low incomes and people who don't have access to a car. So our ability to provide good public transportation service is really, really important in terms of people being able to do things like get to work, get to school, go grocery shopping, get medical care, things like that, visit family and friends. So the transit market shows us where the opportunities are, and those opportunities can be really important to a lot of people. The other thing I mentioned, we looked at travel flows, and one of the findings from the market analysis is this map shows all trips on SEPTA, and the blue lines show cases where about between 40 and 70% of everybody traveling into Center City, in this case, from Northwest Philadelphia, is on a SEPTA service, right? So it could be a bus, it could be a rail line, but there's a lot of people getting into Center City using SEPTA. But when you look at travel between some of the neighborhoods, the use of SEPTA falls off a lot. So that's telling us that there's a lot of opportunities to move people with the bus, especially because there's no fixed rail services between Northwest Philadelphia, for example, and the river wards, or West Philadelphia and North Philadelphia. And so these are some of the key findings. And again, at a super high level, what the market analysis told us about SEPTA's bus network and where there's opportunities to improve it. Another thing that we looked at was, we call it the state of the system. It's where we look at the bus network overall, look at where the bus routes are, what time they operate, how frequently they operate, where ridership is, how they perform. And it does tell us a lot about the strengths and weaknesses of the system. And then again, just a couple of slides about the findings. The report is on the website, so if you're interested in learning a little bit more, I encourage you to go there. One of the biggest opportunities to make SEPTA's bus service better is to make it more reliable. And we saw that at network level. We also heard it from the community, and I'll talk about that in a second. But you can see this is a map of bus speeds, and the red lines are places where the bus is traveling slower than 8 miles per hour. Orange is between 8 and 10. So a lot of the buses into Center City and through Center City, but also much of Philadelphia, are traveling really, really slowly. And that can have a big impact on reliability, certainly on travel times and the usability of transit service. So that was a key finding from the market, from the state of the system analysis. Another thing that we found was that SEPTA has a lot of different modes or types of service that it operates. In some cases, those routes are not well matched with the underlying market, and SEPTA doesn't use those differences between services to communicate how the services work. So where do we have frequent services? Where are the services that last the longest? How do we talk about that? How do we describe that network? So one of the things that we're looking at is creating this idea of a family of services or a category of services, and how we can use that both to improve the network overall, but also make it easier to explain and communicate that network. The other thing that we talked about is the route evaluations, or on the website, they're called route profiles. They mean the same thing. This is where we looked at each of the individual bus routes and took a deep dive into the bus route and looked at it from a lot of different angles. We're starting to post these online too, and we're going to invite you to make some comments on those. Some of the things that we found just at the highest level, again, that SEPTA has a lot of bus routes that carry a lot of riders, right? I think there was something like 10 or 15 routes that carried more than 10,000 riders every day before the pandemic, and many of these bus routes are designed really well. Like this is Route 46 in West Philadelphia, super straight, easy to understand, easy to use, and it carries around 6,000 riders a day. The contrast to that is the Route 89 that travels from Erith into Fishtown and Kensington. This is a bus route, as you can tell by looking at it, that is really complicated. It doesn't travel very directly. It's probably not traveling very quickly, difficult to keep on time, difficult for the driver to operate. And so this is a kind of route that we want to straighten out and try to make service a little bit clearer, easier to understand, easier to operate, and more reliable and faster. So finally, I just want to touch a little bit on the stakeholder and community input that we gathered in 2021. And as a reminder, we did a lot of different things. We had virtual transit talks like this. We did some interviews. We had small group meetings. We did some pop-up events at transit stations. We had some online surveys and some online activities. We did a telephone survey with households throughout the region. And we asked people a lot of different questions. And again, all of the findings are available on the website for you to take a look and provide some feedback. Just a couple things that we learned through these conversations. The first one is, no matter when we ask people or how we ask people or who we asked, when we said, how can we improve SEPTA's bus network, or what's the most important thing? People said that they wanted more frequent and more reliable service. And so we heard that when we talked to riders standing on the street corner at the bus stop. We heard it when we did surveys in meetings like this. We heard it through surveys with stakeholders. So we know that that's something that's really critical. And as mentioned, we saw it in the network analysis as well. So following up on that finding, we did something we call a trade-off survey. We did this survey both as part of our in-person activities. We did it online, and we did it with a telephone survey. And we asked people what they'd be willing to trade in order to get a bus ride that's faster and more reliable. And a lot of times that involved walking a little bit further to a bus that was faster, or we asked people, would you prefer a shorter walk to a slower bus? We also asked people a question about direct path of travel, and then the number of routes and how frequently they operate. So would you prefer more high frequency routes but fewer routes overall, or more routes even if the frequency is lower? So if you took the survey, thank you again. I know that there was a handful of more questions in that survey. I'm just picking these 3 for tonight because I want to keep my presentation a little bit short, but I do want to talk a little bit about what we found. So the first question, we asked people if they were willing to walk longer to a faster bus, and about 57%, this is on the online survey, told us that yes, they would be willing to walk longer to a bus that moved faster. So that was interesting findings for us. The other thing that we noticed, that there's about 40% or so of the riders were either not sure, or they said that they still preferred a shorter walk to a bus that was, even if it was slower. And when we looked into that population, we found that not everybody, but many of those people who said that they didn't want to walk further, even if the bus was slower, they tended to be older folks, as well as more Black folks, other people of color, and riders with lower incomes. So this is something that we noticed and that we're taking into consideration as part of our, when we go to look and design the network and think about how we can make improvements. Likewise, we asked a question about a bus that was more direct and faster, but stops further from a destination, or a bus that was less direct and slower, but brought you closer to your destination. And this one, for the online survey, we had more people say they wanted the faster, more direct bus. The results were a little bit more mixed on the household survey, but there was, again, a fair amount of support for making the bus routes faster and more direct, even if there was a slightly longer walk. But again, we looked into this minority of people who said that they were a little bit less sure that that's what they wanted. We also asked people about the frequency of service and the number of routes. And this one, people told us that they prefer to have more bus routes, even if some of the routes are less frequent. This was not consistent with the findings that we had at the pop-up events, but it does tell us, in this case, the majority said that they wanted more routes with less frequency, but we did see almost half of the people saying that they would be willing to have fewer routes if some of them were more frequent. So overall, this is just telling us that riders are open to changes if those changes make bus service more reliable, but we need to be careful and consider the other group of riders who want and need bus service that's closer to their homes. And so as we come up with bus network improvement ideas, we're really trying to balance these two competing ideas and trying to look in ways that we can make the buses faster and more direct, but then remember that some people are going to want to walk to those buses, and we really need to make sure that walk access is part of some of the answers. So with that, I think I'm going to pause and turn it back to Beverly for a minute, and she is going to do another set of polling questions.
Yes, so we'll have three polling questions, and then Bethany will come back on with her team, two other people from her team, and show you what you can find on the web. And then our goal is to end this session at 7:30. Someone did ask a question about that, so I thought I would answer it right away so they would know. So Henry, let's have the polling questions. Okay, engagement. Have you participated in any previous bus revolution engagement activities? You can check all that apply: virtual transit talks, the survey, pop-up events at the bus transfer stations, or other ways. So 4, 3, 2, 1. Henry, let's close it. 84% participated in the survey and 51 in the transit talks. Excellent. We have about 200 people participating this evening. So thank you for that. Second question, Henry. This is about the website. Have you viewed any of the new materials on the project website? If so, which ones? Check all that apply. Not yet. Executive summary of the market analysis and state of the system. That executive summary is really excellent. The market analysis, the state of the system, the map inventory dashboard, and the route evaluations. So you can pick more than one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's close the poll. Not yet. So not yet means that you intend to. Okay, people have seen the executive summary, and hopefully after this session, when we ask the question again, there'll be more people. So finally, one last question. So the presentation, which part of the presentation do you have the most questions about? Whether or not you choose to ask them tonight, which parts do you have the most questions about? The market analysis, the state of the system, the route evaluations, and public engagement. So by route evaluations, we mean all of the routes, over 100. So let's get your answer. We only want one answer, so it's your priority. The route evaluations, very informative.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so
Bethany, back to you.
Great, thanks, Beverly. So what I wanted to do now is we did do a revamping, a restructuring of the SEPTA Forward Bus Revolution website. And so I want to just kind of give you guys a quick tour. And then, as Beverly mentioned, my colleagues are going to take you into a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the parts of the new website. So if you haven't been to the website in a while, you can see that it looks really different. We have tried to update it quite a bit, and we have put some more information, both the route profiles and the reports. And I just want to kind of walk you through and show you some of this information. So the route profiles are where we have the information on all of the individual routes. So if you click here, then you can see we have a document called How to Read a Route Profile. And if you take a look at that, it's really short. It just tells you a little bit about the different sections, what it includes, and it just gives you a little bit of insight into what you're going to see when you go on to the route to the route evaluations. And then right now we only have 2 sub areas up. We have Norristown and West Philadelphia. There will be some more that get posted next week. And then you're going to start to see this being populated really quickly in the next week or 2. For Norristown, if you click on Norristown, you see the first thing is a Norristown area profile. So if you go to that, it tells you which routes are included, gives you a little bit of overview, background on Norristown and how the service is designed, and then what some of the findings are and what some of the service improvement opportunities are in that case. And then likewise, if you go back to the, you can click on one of the any one of these routes. And so, for example, Route 90, which goes from Plymouth Meeting Mall to the Norristown Transportation Center, the route evaluations are about 10 pages. We tried to keep them as informative as possible without kind of writing too much or providing too much information to people to slog through, but showing the data that we looked at. So you can see they start with an overview of the route, they show you the map, and then there's some information about when it's available, how it's operated, some information about ridership and transfers. This is a map that shows how people are riding the routes, where they're getting on and off by time of day. So there's quite a bit of information. And then there is also this route evaluation dashboard. Adija is going to walk you through that and show you what some of the key information is. And that is all the data that we use to create these route profiles. So I think that will be useful for you if you really like knowing sort of the background and all of the information that we used in. Much of it's interactive, and again, Adija will talk about that. So you can just play with that and then share your feedback or provide any comments with this button, which should appear on every single page. We also have a page where we put all our reports up. You can see some of the things that we talked about: the market analysis, the state of the system, a summary of the engagement, including the survey. And then we also prepared an executive summary. And if you haven't looked at anything, I would suggest that you start with this document. It's intended to summarize both the state of the system and the market analysis. It has more graphics, less words, and hopefully is a little bit easier to read and understand. And then if you want to dive down into some more of the detail, you can do that by downloading some of the other reports. We also have a map inventory, a dashboard or a library that's also interactive. And at this moment, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Michael Caraher. He is the GIS whiz that did almost all of those maps, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about the dashboard and how you can interact with that. So I'll stop sharing my screen and hand it over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Bethany. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Caraher. As Bethany said, I am a data analyst at Nelson Nygaard, and I'll be going through this data inventory library with you all. So as Bethany showed, you can access this inventory webpage from our main project webpage. When you first visit the page, this pop-up appears, detailing a brief description about what the tool does, and goes through some instructions about different control buttons that are available to you when interacting with the main map. Going off this screen, you can always revisit those instructions by clicking the info button in the top right of your screen, and that text is the same as before if you ever need to refresh your memory. So in the upper left-hand corner is where you will probably be doing most of your activity. This first button here is the layer list, containing a number of different layers, which I will go through in a bit more detail in just a moment. The second button here is the legend window, and this is a live window. It actively updates based on whatever layers you have turned on or off. And so whatever is showing in your map currently will be populated here. And then finally, this third button here allows you to change the background base map. Right now, we currently have a designed illustrated base map, but you have many other options here if you are interested in looking at it in a different way. For example, if a good map to turn on is the aerial imagery, you can zoom in and really see what is really going on the ground. So going back to the layer list, this contains all the analysis we have done for our existing conditions report. As Bethany had showed, we have prepared a lot of PDF documents. So a lot of these analyses are in there as static maps, but we know it's sometimes easier and more fulfilling to look at it in more detail. So for example, if I'm interested in a particular area, like a neighborhood or a street, I can use this interactive map to zoom in and look at the data in more detail and see it more clearly. Additionally, most of the data in here also has pop-up info with more information that you could learn. So for example, if I'm in an area that I am not too familiar with, I don't know what bus runs along this street, I can just click on the layer and that will pop up and inform me. And so by default, we are showing the existing SEPTA transit network. I do recommend turning things off depending on what you are interested in. And I just want to highlight a couple different analyses that we have already done. The first is weekday span analysis. So I've just turned on that layer. You can either go back into the legend window to see what these different colors mean, or you can expand the layer group and the same info pops up there. So what I'm showing now is the distribution of service throughout a typical weekday. So how long is a bus route in service? The red routes shown here are available 24 hours a day, yellow at least 20 hours, so 20 to 24. And then the teal routes are routes that are operating less than 20 hours a day. And so this is really useful for our analysis because we can clearly see the distribution of all-day service. So we have a lot of red routes in West Philadelphia, for example, compared to different areas in the north, northwest. And so that's really useful for identifying gaps and then coming up with opportunities to make changes to the system. And another layer I want to show is part of our demographic analysis is the composite transit demand. This is something Bethany showed earlier in her presentation, but now you can zoom in and really look at it at block by block level, what the results came out to be. So as you can see here, the darkest red areas are in Center City, Philadelphia. And so what this analysis does is it looks at the combined densities of population density and employment density, along with several other demographic factors. And we equate that to what level of service can be served there, what level of service can be supported in that area. And so it makes sense that Center City is lighting up here because that's where the people are, that's where the jobs are, that's where there's a lot of activity, and it can support bus service at a high frequency rate. As we move around the city, there are other pockets of high frequency service like West Philadelphia, different healthcare facilities and job centers, and other population centers up in the north. As we start radiating outwards, you'll see more yellow colors and lighter orange, equating to 30-minute or 60-minute service. The population density and employment density is much less out there, but they're still able to support service, just not at a higher rate. So there are about 40 different layers in this web tool. So there's a lot of great information for you to explore on your own and really get into the nitty gritty. So it's a great tool to explore when you have time. So with that, I will hand it over to my colleague Adija, who will show you about our route profile dashboard. Adija?
Hi, I'm Adija, and I can show you a bit about the route profile dashboard, or rather route evaluation dashboard. So when you come to the dashboard, you're able to look at the information that is available in the route profiles. However, you're able to play around with it a bit more and look at some things in a bit more detail. When you first open up the dashboard, you can select the route or trackless trolley route that you're interested in using this menu. You're also able to, using this table of contents to the left, identify, or sorry, it just turned off. But you can also select if you're really, say, interested in on-time performance, you can click on that and the dashboard will quickly take you to that section of the dashboard. So previously I mentioned that the dashboard allows you to work with the data and the information essentially allows you to play with the data. So for example, if you're interested in learning more about the different service patterns, there is a service, you can see them mapped out. and you're able to essentially click on and off different layers to see very clearly what are the differences between the different service patterns for particular routes. If you're interested in, say, understanding where the ridership is along the route, you can take a look at the ridership by stop map. And for context, the size of the stops at the circles, or the sizes of the circles at the stops, is an indication of the level of activity at that stop. So a larger circle means that there's more activity. And so if you're, say, interested in finding out what's happening at a stop with a lot of activity, you can click on it. And so this stop is the Cecil B. Moore Avenue and Broad Street stop. And you can, oh no, sorry, give me one moment to reload and I'll try to describe. But you're also able to zoom in to zoom in and out on maps, so you can look at the map in more detail. And I hope that this reloads.
Yeah, it's loading a little bit slowly right now, just in general. Maybe a lot of people are on it, but so don't worry, Adija. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so great, it's back on. All right. I spoke too soon.
If you get a second, it should populate.
Okay, there we go. So you can zoom in and out on the maps. You're also able to essentially find information about the route in either direction. So eastbound service and westbound service. So if it might not load, but you can see how essentially some of the patterns flip. You could look at service at different days of the week and in different years, but please be aware that data for fall 2021 is not yet available for all routes. If you're interested in learning about speeds, which Bethany touched on when discussing the state of the system, you can take a look at different segments of the routes and see essentially how quickly the bus is operating. So for Route 3 between 33rd Street and 20th Street, the bus is going about 7 miles per average. Sorry, about 7 miles per hour on average. So those are some of the features of the route profile dashboard. And now I'll hand back off to Bethany.
Awesome. Thank you, Adija. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, so as you can see, we have a lot of data available for you and a lot of things to look at as part of the project. And, in full transparency, we're trying to just share as much of the information that we have and get you guys an opportunity to really see what we saw and understand where our recommendations are coming from, where we're finding ideas for improvement, and let us know what you think. If you think we're spot on, then that would be great to know. If you think that we've missed something, or you have a different idea, or you think something we suggested doesn't make any sense, we'd also love to hear that, because that's the kind of feedback that's going to help us craft the network, come up with ideas for these changes, and then you'll start to see them as we start to develop these networks and give you some choices about how SEPTA's bus routes can change and evolve over time. So looking forward to 2022, we're all going to be really busy. Hopefully you guys we're going to come talk to you a lot or hear from you quite a bit. So these are supposed to be months, so January, February, March, April, May. We updated the website and we're having this meeting. So we're looking forward to hearing from you as you make comments on the route evaluations and on the market analysis and some of the other materials that are there. We'll take that feedback as we create some of the service improvement options and some of the ideas for how we can improve the network overall. And then we are at the same time gearing up for a big community engagement period in April, and we'll bring our draft ideas to you and hopefully get some feedback. And then based on that input, we'll come up with a set of draft recommendations. And then in the summer, we'll come back and show you this draft network. It will be a sort of a draft final and ask for some more comments and some more feedback. And then based on that information, we'll come up with the draft recommendations. And then we'll have a long period of engagement in the fall and then start to move towards implementation in 2023. So a lot to come, a lot to do right now. We're really excited because we're making progress and we're kind of getting to the fun part where we're really talking about what we can do and how we can make things better. We are also, in anticipation of all this, we've scheduled some transit talks now for the rest of the year, well, at least for the next 9 months. So the first Thursday in April, July, and September, we'll have a transit talk like this one, different topics, but from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. So hope to hear and from you at those times. And then I'm going to stop talking, but just want to remind you to look for the Bus Revolution team in April. We hope to be out in the field and virtually and in person and lots of different ways so that we can talk to you about what we're finding and what we're proposing. And so with that, I will turn it over to Henry. You want to see what we have for questions and answers? We have about 15 minutes or so.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you, Bethany. Hello, everyone. I'm Henry Felsman from Portfolio Associates. I'm going through your questions. We've got a ton so far, and I encourage you to keep asking them as you have questions. Even if we don't get to your question, we'll look at it following the meeting, where we'll update the FAQ on the website, but we're going to try to get to as many as possible. So some of these I might have been answered in the presentation, but they're good to kind of restate for clarification purposes. Some are more technical, some yes or no, but we'll try to get to as many as possible. So enough of me. First question, what are your thoughts on adding more direct bus routes to the system? For example, the 23 bus, which could really use an express bus and several other high ridership routes going through dense corridors.
Okay, so that's a great question. And I think, Dan, I'll take a stab at it. And if I don't answer it exactly the way that, or you have another perspective or something else to add, feel free to jump in. So for sure, this idea of direct bus, or sometimes we've been calling it rapid bus or bus rapid transit, those kind of opportunities for those direct, fast, frequent, and maybe in some cases, especially branded bus routes is definitely a strategy that we want to look at. And we can look at Route 23, but those main corridors where SEPTA is carrying 8, 9, 10,000 riders a day. Those are some of the places that we'll be looking for that kind of service.
And just Bethany, I'm in a full agreement. I think the only other thing I would mention is that part of this project is identifying future capital investments that we would like to pursue. So, better, direct bus, those types of improvements and other types of transit priority measures are on the table. Maybe with a longer horizon line for implementation, but they're definitely something we're interested in pursuing.
All right. Now we've got a couple of questions about suburban routes and funding. So I'm just going to ask both questions. They're slightly different, but maybe they're best asked together. So first, since SEPTA is facing a funding shortfall, how will you get the 4 suburban counties to fund any suburban bus service frequency increases? And then another question related to that is, how will a cost-neutral redesign be able to expand transit to high-demand areas outside of the urban core?
All right. So again, I'll take the first stab. But Dan, I think I'll leave the first funding question for you to come back to. But this idea that how can we add frequency or span of service if we don't have any additional resources? But what we are finding in, as part of our work is that there's some redundancy and some duplication in the system. And there are opportunities to either not serve the same corridor twice, or to serve it in slightly different ways and shake some funding out or some additional resources. There's some segments of routes that aren't well used. There are some service patterns that aren't well used. And so there may be opportunities to reinvest some of those segments and some of those routes that aren't as well used, or in cases where 2 buses are running on the same corridor, we may be able to pull one out and take those resources and reinvest them somewhere else. So we have a lot of ideas about how we can shake some of those out, and usually we are able to find some savings even when we don't have additional resources.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the funding question, all of our partners, the city and all the counties are involved in this project. We've met with them on a regular basis. We have shared priorities and shared goals. They are transit advocates. So I think part of what we're trying to do with this project is identify how we can strengthen our network to support their goals. And I think, through that shared vision is how we, seek out and get the funding that we need. Obviously, that's an issue, that's affecting transit agencies all over the country right now. But all we can do is work with our partners and work with the resources that we have at the time being.
A couple questions here about how you're using and analyzing public feedback. So take these one at a time. Are any of the responses, I guess, to the survey, to other feedback exercises, weighted by the frequency that riders ride the system?
So the survey results are not weighted by, so the survey responses that we did previously, we might have asked people where they lived, but I don't think we asked people what bus route they rode. So we did not weight them by the frequency of the bus route. We did weight them a little bit to make sure that they matched the underlying population in the region, so that we didn't have, if more young people filled out the survey, for example, we did weight the survey to match sort of the age demographics of the entire, I think we did it by race only. Adija did a lot of that analysis, but right, it was just race that we weighted it. But we did weight the sample so that it reflects the underlying population, but not by frequency of the route or frequency of hearing that. But if we hear a lot of comments about the same route many, many times, of course, we will put more emphasis and more weight on that.
Well, just in general, I think the survey asked riders how frequently they use SEPTA buses.
Oh, I see. It's
Yeah,
like someone's a frequent rider. We could go back and take a look at that if it seems like that might be an interesting thing to do. Yeah.
Same topic, but different question. So wouldn't it be worth looking at where people who prefer a closer, slower bus live? Most likely they're in neighborhoods where it is dangerous to walk.
Right. Yep. We in the results that we have in there, we didn't look at where home zip codes, but we can go back and take a look at that. Actually, we received that comment from somebody else too.
Okay. One more on engagement right here. Could you elaborate further about the takeaway of the elderly, poor, low income, Black people not wanting to walk further? It says the way the results are presented sounds like it's grounded in a stereotype based on how the questions were asked. So how are the questions asked, and how are the survey results kind of looked at across demographics?
So we did ask the questions in a lot of different ways. We did them by telephone. We did a household sample. We asked a market research to ask those questions and called people and asked them. We also did it online. And then we also asked people in person as part of the pop-up events. We had some posters and some tables set up, and we asked people to talk to us about what some of those trade-offs were and explain to us what their choices were. So yeah, I think one of the reasons we wanted to find out is that a trade-off that people were comfortable with? And then we found out that some of the people, and people said, oh yeah, some people are willing to walk, but what about older adults? What about people with disabilities? And so we were able to look at people with those characteristics and see how they answered the question. And I hope I didn't give this impression, but it wasn't that everybody who said that they didn't want to walk to, that they wanted a slower bus was older or more likely to be Black or more likely to have they were more likely to, but there were also older adults who were willing to walk longer to a faster bus, or same for Black people and low income people and other demographic characteristics. It just was that there was a higher concentration of some of the historically disadvantaged populations who were interested in a slower walk. So one of the ways that we might apply that is, for example, we could do another one of those geography, we could take another look at it and look for those answers geographically, but also in neighborhoods where we know that there are a lot of older adults or people with really low incomes that we might err on the side of shorter walks as we develop our options.
Okay. Is there any consideration being given to how school students use the system?
Yeah, for sure. And there are, you can see that in the ridership data and in the dashboard. Some of the analysis that you can see is ridership by trip and by time of day, and you can see the peaking patterns. And a lot of times we see strong peaks at around 2 o'clock or around 2:30. We know that, and then we can look at the route and see that it passes a high school, or when we go over and discuss the routes with SEPTA staff, they say, okay, that serves a bunch of high school on this corridor. So we can see those patterns, and we can make sure that we serve that those destinations and those corridors where there are a lot of high schools or middle schools, that they have service at those bell times. So that is something that we are definitely considering.
Great. A couple of quick clarifying questions. When was the ridership information collected?
So that is a great question. There is most of the data that, well, all of the data that is in the route evaluations or the route profiles is from the fall 2019. And then we did have some data from from the summer 2020. It wasn't super consistent. We just got data for fall 2021 that was just collected at the end of last year, or sort of October, November range. And that data is on the dashboard, so you can look at how things changed from 2019 to 2021. It's not in the written analysis, but it is on the dashboard. And then I think Adija mentioned that it's not for all of the routes. I think it's up. The first 90 routes do have the data, but 90 routes numbered 90 and up don't have the data yet, but we are working with SEPTA to get that in there and to populate that. So,
and just to add a bit here, the we started with fall 2019, which obviously is pre-COVID, but we are planning on monitoring ridership through the rest of this year and into next year as we enter the implementation phase, where it would be silly not to. So we're going to be keeping an eye on how our system evolves over this year as we continue to refine our scenarios and our network.
Okay. One more quick clarifying question. Does the route evaluations include suburban buses?
It does. Yep. Yep. The only thing, as I mentioned, that's not available right now on the dashboard is the 2021 data. And I think I'm just going to share my screen for 1 second. Adija showed this to you, but just in case, let's see if I can move this. So you can see all of the routes. And then when you look at the ridership data, there's a couple of places, but for sure, so ridership by stop, you can see fall 2019 and then fall 2021. And one of the things that's been interesting to look at is this is a graph that shows ridership by time of day. And you can see, you can look at it for fall, I probably shouldn't have clicked that, but fall 2019 only, or you can see the two time periods together and how different the ridership is. The red line is for weekdays, the dotted line is, I think it's 2019, and then the solid line is 2021, and you can see it's lower, and then the green is, in this case, it's Saturday service. So the peaks are much less strong, the demands come down quite a bit during the peak period, and it's a little bit closer in the midday. And so those, you can just take a look at that, and that's something that we looked at as well and spent some time trying to understand.
And the profiles, like the PDF profiles, are going to be published on an ongoing basis. They're not all available right at this time, but they'll be coming online, in bursts.
We had a couple of questions on some of the more technical methodology of the scoring, the transit propensity score. But there's a question I thought got to the heart of it in a simple way. What does able to support service mean in quantitative and qualitative terms?
All right, so I might need a little bit of help from Michael on this. But what we mean by when we say able to support, it means that there's enough people and enough jobs and people with certain characteristics that if we ran a bus every 5 minutes, that there would be enough people who wanted to get on that bus to make it worth running. So there'd be, I don't know, 20, 30 people on every trip if we ran it through that corridor based on that underlying demographic and population data. Is that pretty good, Michael?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
those frequencies are tied to like people per acre and jobs per acre. We have a formula that spits that out.
And that's also based on national experience with bus services and ridership data from around the country.
We have about 5 more minutes. There's 69 questions in the Q&A. We're not going to get to all of them. Can you let us know how people will be able to find the answers to these questions?
So answers to the questions from the chat, or?
Yeah, from the Q&A that we can't get to tonight because there are far too many questions and we only have about 5 minutes left.
So I think one of the things that we can do is go through those questions. I mean, Henry, you might have a better sense than me. And there's probably some of them that are similar that we could group or categorize and then put together another FAQ or frequently asked question. And then if there's something that you're really interested in, you know, that you don't see in the FAQ, you can go and submit that comment on the website again.
Great. Okay, Henry, so you probably have about, can probably do about 3 more questions with short answers.
Yeah. One thing to add to that is that if you want to, you can always email your question in to busnetwork@septa.org too. Like if you don't want to wait for the FAQ to be updated or it's anything to be posted, feel free to write that in. There are people that will respond to your questions on the other end of that email.
Great.
All right. A couple of questions about how does the bus revolution relate to reimagining regional rail? And what's the thought about how you integrate those 2 projects?
I can take this one, Bethany. So Reimagining Regional Rail and Bus Revolution are really important projects. They are, kind of orbiting each other, but they are related, and it's important that we find opportunities in our bus network to create connections to the regional rail network for a number of reasons. In terms of integration, I think obviously fares are the single biggest barrier to that, but I'm confident through the Reimagining Regional Rail process. I mean, they've already identified that as a barrier, and finding strategic locations where we can make connections that can make people's trips, faster and more convenient are part of our plan. And we're not, most of the people that use the system currently are transferring to, the Broad Street line or the Market Frankfurt line or to another bus route. But I think the regional rail network is a really untapped asset. So, certainly through our work, we're trying to identify connections, and then we'll be working with the regional rail team to try to make those connections, work best and explore fare integration and other things, and maybe it doesn't all happen at once, but I think we need to make it all happen, to fulfill the vision of the strategic plan.
Okay. Question, have you considered smaller size transportation vehicles for off-peak hours to provide more frequency with less people on each vehicle to avoid waste of fuel or electricity?
So we for sure, we'll be looking at small vehicles, especially microtransit, in some zones and some areas where there is a need for transit service, but not enough demand for maybe a 40-foot bus, and look at microtransit and how that might be used as a strategy. Yeah. So yes, yeah.
One more question.
One more question. Have you studied the effects of dedicated bus lanes for certain routes?
Yeah, so, and I'll start. I know that, Dan, you have some opinions and ideas about that. So yeah, I mean, of course, dedicated bus lanes and how they're implemented is a really important strategy and opportunity for the for SEPTA overall and for the city of Philadelphia and even some of the suburban locations. They can be difficult to implement, but they can have a big impact on speed, reliability, help move large volumes of riders. So yes, it is something that we have studied and will continue to study, and you will see some, I think, state of the system and the executive summary both touch on that topic.
The city and SEPTA collaborated on the Market and JFK bus lanes, and it's a limited pilot, but we are sort of just cracking into the data to get a better idea of how it may impact, just service on those few blocks. We also have an ongoing partnership through the Transit Priority Committee with the city to identify, plan, and try to implement other bus priority projects. And bus lanes are, one tool in the toolbox. The city's transit plan, mentioned those, but there are other things we can do. The city streets are really constrained. So we have to be really creative and thorough when we identify solutions like this. But yeah, it's a part of this project, and it's something that we plan on expanding our footprint on in the future.
Okay, thank you, Henry. Thank you, everyone. Just a couple of statistics here. We had 453 people who registered for the session. We had about 170 who participated, and we had 86 questions.
Wow.
So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Thanks, Bev. I don't have much more to say. This has been great. We love doing these. We're going to do more this year. I think we settled on a bi-monthly schedule to do these. We have a lot of exciting work coming up. I really invite all of you to visit the project site. It's really important that we get public feedback on the materials, the root profiles, the reports, everything, and we're hard at work now, sort of crafting the scenarios, and your feedback on the profiles will feed into that process and feed into the draft network design as we go through 2022. But thank you so much for coming out tonight, and we really appreciate your support and interest in the project, and have a great evening.